Welcome to Sinister Serials, where shadows whisper and every tale chills to the bone. Driller Thursday brings tales of survival, where every shadow could be your last. Dive into the depths of the mind with Labyrinth of the Unseen, this Thriller Thursday. Follow Elaine Mercer, a New York psychologist, as she deciphers a cryptic letter leading her to an abandoned warehouse and into a mysterious labyrinth. Inside, reality warps, as her patient's phobias and her own traumatic past manifest in terrifying ways. As Elaine confronts the labyrinth's creator, she must navigate a maze of psychological terror. Will she uncover the truth, or will the labyrinth claim her sanity?
Chapter 8. The darkness intensified as Elaine descended deeper, the staircase narrowing. She trailed her hand along one wall, its stone frigid and damp, anything to stave off the vertiginous sense of plunging into a bottomless abyss. Her footsteps echoed, announcing her presence to whatever haunts called this serpentine pit home. Without warning, Elaine stumbled out into hazy radiance. Shielding her eyes, she perceived flowing shapes that slowly resolved into familiar surroundings. Her psychology office, shelves and framed degrees comforting in their resolute reality. But the light held a viscous quality, refracting oddly. Elaine blinked hard several times before the mirage solidified. This was no abstract dreamscape, but a flawless replica of the environment she had occupied for years, starkly juxtaposed against the labyrinthine nonsense. She almost laughed aloud at the ordinary sight of her desk and the orchid Amanda had given her after their breakthrough session. Knots of tension began unraveling in Elaine's shoulders. Perhaps this oasis indicated her feverish mind was mending itself, reasserting order over chaos. She circled her desk, trailing her fingers over every prosaic texture and contour. But as she peered into the hallway, hoping to glimpse the exit, the light spasmed. Darkness flooded back as oil, carrying viscous sounds, wet, tearing. Elaine cried out at sudden movement. A pale, sinuous shape writhed briefly before the office facade reasserted itself. Clenching her fists to quell their shaking, Elaine knew with despair that this illusion was just another violation. The labyrinth would permit no comfort or clarity. She tore her gaze away from the thing undulating lazily across the paneled walls. It would feed off her panic. Pressing her back against solid oak, Elaine focused on regulating each breath, despite the insidious whispers echoing from unseen corridors. She would not indulge its sadistic agenda by reacting. But the longer she endured the rising tide of voices gibbering just below the threshold of comprehension, the more Elaine questioned her own fraying sanity. When she could no longer bear the auditory assault, Elaine stumbled into the hallway, one arm shielding her face defensively. She flung open a random door, desperate for any respite, however fleeting. Instead, she found herself sinking into familiar nightmare. Reflections of her fractured psyche stretched endless before her, bloody letters scrawled across every mirror surface. All your demons know your name. A pathetic cry escaped Elaine's throat. She spun frantically, seeking escape, but her own haunted eyes peered back infinitely. They were all portals, promising revelation with their fractal eternities, but revealing only more of the labyrinth's horrors. Suddenly, Elaine glimpsed indistinct movement in the nearest mirror. A small child wandered barefoot through that silver realm, her outline blurred as if peering through mottled glass. Heart seizing, Elaine pressed both palms against the mirror's surface. Wait! But the fragile apparition had already melted away, leaving only Elaine's warped reflection staring back. Tears blurred her vision until they too subsided, dripping down the mirror's face like blood. Elaine wanted to scream, but lacked air or voice or sense of self at all anymore. Then she noticed, at her own feet lay a tarnished silver key, etched with unfamiliar symbols. A tool? A weapon? The relic offered no answers, but when Elaine finally picked it up, an electrical surge jolted her nerveless limbs. She may be lost and broken, but she yet grasped firmly to a lifeline thrown, and she would follow its chain out of shadows. Clutching the engraved key in a white-knuckled grip, Elaine crept from the mirrored chamber with senses heightened for the labyrinth's next assault. She traced one wall, seeking any irregularity that might indicate a hidden door. Escape was paramount, She must map the maze's convoluted topography or risk getting turned around in its non-Euclidean geometry. Rounding a bend, Elaine paused at faint echoing cries, then rushed recklessly toward their source. But she skidded to a halt as the hallway kaleidoscoped into Escher-esque impossibility, stairs climbing sideways, others spiraling upside down. Space folded in upon itself, obeying no natural laws. Elaine squeezed her eyes shut against the madness, then flashed them open, steeling herself. She must move forward using some semblance of logic, or inertia would claim her. With jittery purpose, she climbed the impossible stairs, shivering as the gaping ceiling yawned below. Vertigo surged, but Elaine fixated on the cries drawing inexorably nearer, until she emerged onto a curtained stage, velvet drapes and gilded trim undeniably real. Breathless, she parted the curtains further, gaping at tiered seating and candelabras with flickering bulbs. Elaine blinked hard. Was she somehow back at the university theater? But no, the chairs were filled with faceless specters awaiting some macabre performance. Spotlights illuminated a lone microphone at center stage. Elaine glanced behind her, but the passageway had become seamless wall. Steeling herself, she stepped into the intense lights, their heat oppressive. As she opened her mouth to speak, a disembodied voice filled the auditorium. Now presenting star patient Elaine Mercer in an exclusive interview. Tell us, Elaine, what first drew you to become a psychologist? Elaine froze, squinting out at the shadowy crowd. She could discern eyes now, watching with hungry expectation. Licking dry lips, she leaned toward the microphone. I wanted to help people struggling with trauma. The voice interrupted sharply. Because of your own history of abuse, correct? You must have enjoyed peering into other victims' suffering. No, Elaine cried out. I wanted to guide them to healing. Through reliving their pain? The voice took on a derisive edge. Admit it, you enjoyed playing God. I helped them escape pain using empathy and... Enough! The unseen crowd erupted, specters melting together into a roiling mass, their discordant shrieks accused endlessly. Sadist, emotional vampire, get her off the stage! Elaine stumbled backwards, the condemning cries amplified by her own voice until she collapsed, welcoming the embrace of oblivion. A sharp pain on her cheek wrenched Elaine back. A little girl peered down, eyebrows knitted in concern, heart leaping. Elaine sat up, glimpsing a hidden maintenance door cracked open behind the child. Hurry! Hissing urgently, the girl pulled Elaine's wrist. Elaine staggered after her lifeline, leaving the stage and its judgmental ghosts behind. She had survived the Labyrinth's latest trial, but its accusations echoed inside her skull, inextricable from her own doubts. How long before they drowned her completely? Elaine ran blindly, dragged by the small hand clutched desperately in her own. Her breath sobbed loudly in the narrow passageway, keeping frantic tempo with her pounding heart. She must get as far away as possible from that vicious theater and its snarling occupants. After an endless nightmare scramble through lightless tunnels, Elaine wrenched her wrist free, doubling over gagging. The accusing voices ringing in her skull slowly dissipated, leaving only the little girl's concerned humming. Elaine squinted through stinging tears at her rescuer. The child seemed familiar somehow, though specifics hovered just out of memory's reach. Thank you, Elaine finally managed, swiping at her eyes. I thought I would be trapped there. The girl tilted her head, assessing. The maze changes you, makes you see things. Her voice held eerie maturity. Elaine's mouth twisted. It tries unmaking me, yes? She hesitated. What brings you to this terrible place, child? The girl turned partly away, features obscured. I've always been here, I think. Unease skittered down Elaine's spine. Surely you had a life above ground? She gently reached to touch the girl's shoulder. Her fingers met only cold stone. Wheels turned frantically in Elaine's mind before clicking into dreadful alignment. This was no rescued damsel, but rather her child self's lingering ghost, somehow made incarnate. The labyrinth had dredged up her most vulnerable shards to steal sanity once and for all. Elaine had found no escape route, but rather her own personal cul-de-sac. She opened her mouth to speak, but shadows had already reclaimed the illusion, wearing a poor lost girl's face. Numb, Elaine slid down the wall, all compass needles now spinning without cease. She had relied too desperately on the child as embodiment of hope, not considering how the labyrinth manipulates even the purest impulse. It had no interest in feasting on logic or reason. Those were trifles. This entity's true sustenance was the relentless extraction of visceral agony and ecstasy alike from human souls. Elaine ground her palms against her eyes until colors burst. She was so very tired of being a puppet with tangled strings. Using the last dregs of defiance, she staggered up and walked on through the dark. The labyrinth could drag her as far down as it liked. She would simply close herself off and drift untethered. It could not consume what refused to cling to useless anchors. Elaine embraced sensory deprivation, cocooning vulnerable psyche in unfeeling void. Elaine drifted in silent limbo, her physical form on autopilot while consciousness retreated inward. She had constructed intricate mental sanctuaries before as a child fleeing trauma's unrelenting current. Now she fortified her psyche's last stronghold, reinforcing bulwarks with clinical precision against siege. No more reacting blindly to the labyrinth's emotional manipulation. She would observe dispassionately, an analyst assessing subject response. Distance was paramount. Elaine cocooned herself in academic language, quantifying stimuli and neural signaling. If she could not regain spatial control here, she must at least govern her mental landscape. Her body moved through the maze without sensory input, one hand trailing along stone corridors out of animal instinct. Elaine ignored physical stimuli, floating in cold control center where she cataloged data points. Temperature 12 C, luminosity 0.3 lux. Airborne pheromones from decaying organic matter, faint vibrations indicating a vertical drop ahead. When forward movement halted abruptly, Elaine opened her eyes without feeling. A jagged crevasse split the passage, an impenetrable barrier to further progress. Scanning the sheer walls, she noted fractures in the slate-gray matrix indicating structural instability over time. The analytic overlay wavered as Elaine's gut churned. Doubts needled her facade of clinical impartiality. Perhaps she had isolated herself too thoroughly and lost opportunities the maze provided for escape. Untethered consciousness left her no control over a body on autopilot. A thunderous crack split the air as the crevasse widened violently. Elaine's body teetered at its crumbling edge. With desperation, she flung out both hands, straining for any purchase against gravity's ruthless strength. Cold stone bit into her skin, halting her precarious slide into the hungry dark. Elaine clawed upwards, equilibrium wavering. Veins of glittering mineral threaded the fractured wall, lifelines for dragging herself back from the brink through sheer frenzied purpose. Panting, she rolled onto solid ground, hugging cold floor. Mortal frailty had reasserted itself, cracking her clinical armor. Physical and mental worlds required reconciliation to navigate this place. Elaine lifted her head, prepared to let the labyrinth's full sensory barrage reawaken her numbed psyche once more. Elaine lay very still, allowing sensation to seep slowly back into her body. The chill from icy stone below leached through tissue and bone. Her heart thrummed against taut muscle and skin that prickled in the subterranean cold. Drawing her limbs in to conserve warmth, Elaine assessed her situation, with clinical clarity finally integrated into physical experience. She had created dangerous dissociation, severing ties between body and mind that left her vulnerable. The labyrinth embraced such division, absorbing fractured pieces easier than whole beings who built connection through each breath. Elaine inhaled deeply, envisioning neurons sparking new pathways between analytical and somatic domains. She focused next on external environment, the mineral taste to the dank air, rough-hewn stone beneath her cheek, the womb-like enclosure of absolute darkness. Her senses fed fresh data, affirming immutable bodily presence anchored to this space and time. Elaine blinked hard several times, pupils dilating to embrace available light. She perceived subtle radiance highlighting the steep crevasse bisecting her path ahead. Craning her neck, Elaine traced the thin luminescence to pinprick gaps far overhead. They glittered like stars, promise of unattainable freedom in their cold fire. She swallowed hard. No escaping that route without wings. Gingerly, Elaine flexed her left wrist and winced as pain lanced up her arm, sprained or fractured. She tore fabric strips to bind it tight, then stretched each limb slowly. No further serious injuries, though she suspected bruised ribs. Finally, Elaine rolled up carefully, bracing herself against the raw stone face while she found her feet. Time and trauma had splintered her psyche into so many shards, but she was remembering how to knit them together again into strengthened glass. For now, she need only place one foot before the other down the path left to her. Elaine shook out her shoulders and straightened with deliberation. Then she walked on into darkness, eyes upturned, hunting for those distant pinprick stars. They were much too far to reach in life, but in memory, perhaps. Elaine shuffled onward, one hand trailing the rough-hewn wall as the darkness intensified. The fissure behind her and its beckoning void had to be put out of mind. She focused instead on steadying her breath against the subterranean chill, the expansion and contraction of lungs proving she yet inhabited a physical form. The strange material glinting within the crevasse still troubled her. She was no geologist, but had read treatises on minerals as a precocious child fleeing turmoil at home. Something about its latent glow and filament structure struck her as beyond natural formation. Its purpose and origin remained obscure, but disquiet needled Elaine's thoughts. She paused, cocking her head at soft scraping ahead, then hurried forward. A dim aura illuminated a small side chamber, and Elaine nearly wept with relief. Shelter from the abortion tunnel and potential access to information, the first she had encountered thus far. Stepping inside, Elaine traced her fingers over the tiny makeshift library. Books and scrolls piled high in uneven teetering towers lined 3 walls. She selected a volume bound in faded leather, squinting to decipher the old-fashioned calligraphy. It appeared to be a scientific analysis of neurological response to external stimuli. Elaine's pulse quickened. This lab had all the trappings of a grand-scale experiment. Records could provide insight about its hypothesis and architect. Elaine worked rapidly, scanning each document and adding pertinent details to a rough map by intermittent candlelight. Hours bled together until forearms ached from note-taking. She had recorded tempting clues, early psychological conditioning theories, anatomical studies, arcane symbols, and philosophical rants, but no concise picture emerged. Like the lab itself, its design remained convoluted and ephemeral when directly confronted. Biting back frustration, Elaine added the workspace to her map with a question mark. She must return here to cross-reference recovered fragments with any new data. The keys to escape were certainly scattered across these chaotic pages. Hunger suddenly twisted Elaine's stomach, and she eyed the candle nub doubtfully. Time held little meaning, but bodily needs persisted. She must prioritize sustenance and rest or lack stamina to continue investigation. Pocketing her tools, Elaine secured the library door and moved deeper into the shadows with renewed conviction. The labyrinth could drag her as far down as it pleased. Her mind would remain free.
Welcome to Sinister Serials, where shadows whisper and every tale chills to the bone. Join us on Macabre Monday for gothic tales shrouded in mist and mystery. Twisted Tuesday will unravel your mind with psychological thrillers that blur the line between reality and madness. On Weird Wednesday, cosmic horrors from beyond the stars will haunt your dreams. Thriller Thursday brings tales of survival, where every shadow could be your last. Fantasy Friday weaves stories of ancient magic and mythical beasts. Sci-Fi Saturday launches you into dark futures and alien terrors. And on Supernatural Sunday, ghostly whispers and paranormal mysteries will leave you questioning what's truly beyond. Step into the darkness with us. The stories are just beginning.